At 3:12 a.m., I heard the sound of someone slowly walking inside the basement wall. I thought the house was just making noise because it was old. Then, from the other side of the wall, my name was whispered 3 times. David. Hello, friends. Welcome to today's episode of True Horror Vault. In today's episode, we will listen to 3 chilling, realistic horror stories centered around old houses. There are no supernatural spirits here. No ghosts. The fear comes from a place we usually consider the safest. Our own home, an abandoned house, an old basement, and people who use the dark spaces to hide. The first incident happened to David in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is David. I was 30 years old when this happened. About a year ago, I bought an old house in the suburbs of Pittsburgh. The house was almost 100 years old. It didn't look very pretty, but the price was well within my budget. A 2-story wooden house, a front porch with an old wooden floor, an overgrown backyard in the rear, and a large basement downstairs. Before buying the house, an inspector came over. He said that although the house was old, the structure was fairly solid. There was only a moisture issue in some parts of the basement. I didn't think much of it. The first few weeks were completely normal. I was cleaning up, painting the walls, and moving old furniture around. But one thing felt strange right from the start. The wall on the north side of the basement was noticeably thicker than the other walls. I thought it was probably part of the old foundation. One night, I went downstairs to store some cardboard boxes. It was around 11 p.m. I put the boxes down and was walking back up. Right then, thud, I stopped in my tracks. The sound came from inside the wall. I waited to hear it again. Nothing. I tapped on the wall with my knuckles. Thud, thud, no response. I chuckled and told myself, "Oh, house." Then I went back upstairs. The next night, the exact same sound occurred. This time, a bit louder. Thud, thud, thud. I stood in the basement. The sound was coming directly from that thick wall. I turned on my phone flashlight and examined the wall carefully. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. However, near the floor, I noticed an old wooden panel. I hadn't noticed it before. The panel had been painted over, but right below the paint, a tiny gap was visible. I pulled it with my hand. It didn't budge. I brought a screwdriver. After a few minutes of trying, the panel opened slightly. Behind it lay a dark, hollow space. I pointed my flashlight inside. There was a narrow passage. At first, I thought it was just an old utility space. But then, my flashlight beam fell on something. An old folding chair. And right next to the chair, a few empty water bottles. I immediately closed the panel. The next day, I brought in a contractor. He examined the wall and said, "There's definitely a crawl space back there." He told me it wasn't unusual for old houses to have spaces like this. However, one thing made him uncomfortable. There was no official access point leading into that crawl space. I asked him to tear it open and inspect it. He agreed, but the night before he was supposed to come, the sound returned. This time, the sound wasn't just inside the wall. It felt like someone was walking inside the passage. I looked down toward the basement from my bedroom upstairs. The footsteps stopped. Then, thud. Once. Then again. Thud. I didn't go downstairs for the rest of the night. The contractor arrived the next morning. We opened up the panel completely. Inside was a narrow crawl space, about 3 feet wide. And in there, an old mattress, a blanket, a few food wrappers, and a battery-powered lantern. That's when I realized someone hadn't just used this space for storage. Someone had been living there. The contractor immediately told me to step outside. We called the police. The police arrived and searched the entire basement and crawl space. After a while, they found a second exit at the far end of the passage. It led out underneath an old shed in the backyard, meaning someone could enter the crawl space from the outside whenever they wanted. The police asked if I had noticed anything unusual around the house over the past few weeks. I mentioned hearing noises in the middle of the night. Then they showed me a photo taken inside the basement crawl space. They found an old notebook inside. Inside, several dates were written down. Those dates were from the period after I had moved into the house. I lost my speech for a moment looking at it, because on the last page of the notebook, it was written, "He sleeps upstairs." The police searched the entire house further, but no one was found that day. They suspected that whoever was hiding there had managed to escape through the second exit in the crawl space. A few days later, they learned that an acquaintance of the previous owner was frequently seen wandering around the area. He had a prior record of breaking and entering. However, there wasn't enough evidence to directly tie him to what happened at my house. I had that crawl space permanently sealed off. Then, I changed all the locks in the basement. Yet, about a month after the incident, I was standing in the kitchen late one night. Suddenly, a sound came from the direction of the basement. Thud. I froze. Then, another one. Thud. I stared toward the basement door. I knew the crawl space was already sealed tight. No one should have been able to get in there. Even so, the sound came a third time. Thud. I didn't go into the basement that night. I called the police. They came and searched everything thoroughly. No one was there. However, right in front of the basement door, there was a single wet footprint. Just one. And then nothing else. I don't know where it came from. I also don't know when that person was inside my house for the last time. But there is one thing I have never been able to forget. When I first heard that noise coming from inside the wall on that first night, I thought the house was making noise because it was old. In reality, the house wasn't making noise. Someone was inside the house. Friends, you heard the first story. David thought the strange noises in his old house were just due to aging wood and the foundation. But behind the wall, he discovered something that proved someone had been hiding inside his house all along. Now, we head to an old house in Oregon, where a couple moves in and discovers a room that didn't exist on any blueprint of their home. At first, they assumed it was just an old storage room. But after opening the door, they realized someone had been using that room for a very long time. My name is Rachel. This incident took place outside of Salem, Oregon, in a quiet neighborhood. My husband Eric and I had just moved into a new house. The house was about 70 years old. 2 stories, wooden siding, a large attic, and dense trees behind the property. At first glance, the house felt a bit unsettling to us. However, the price was great, and it was only 20 minutes away from our workplace. So we didn't think twice about it. The first few weeks were totally normal. Then I noticed something strange. A specific section of the hallway next to our master bedroom remained dark at all times. There was no light switch nearby. One day, while cleaning the wall with my hand, I noticed an odd sound. Thud. The wall sounded hollow from the inside. I called Eric over. He came and tapped on the wall a few times. Thud. Thud. Eric said, "There's definitely something behind this." We thought it might be old plumbing or utility space. So we let it be for that day. 2 days later, Eric was out of town for work. I was alone at home. It was around 10 p.m. I was walking through the upstairs hallway. Suddenly, I heard a sound from inside the wall, as if someone was very slowly dragging something. Juror, I stopped dead in my tracks. Then it happened again. I rushed downstairs immediately. When Eric returned home, I told him everything. The next day, we decided to inspect that section of the wall. Eric removed a small section of the drywall. Behind it, a narrow wooden door appeared. There was old paint on the door. No handle, just a small metal latch. Eric unlatched it. As soon as the door opened, cold, musty air rushed out from inside. We turned on our flashlight. Inside was a tiny room, roughly 8 feet by 10 feet. No windows. An old mattress lay on the floor, a folding chair, and a small table. On top of the table were several empty water bottles. Eric looked at me and said, "Someone's been in here." I asked, "Recently?" He didn't answer, because there was a blanket on top of the mattress, and that blanket wasn't completely covered in dust, which meant someone had probably used it very recently. We immediately called the police. The officers arrived and examined the room. At first, They suggested it might just be a hidden storage room built by the previous owners. However, inside the room, they found something that didn't fit a storage space. A small notebook. Written inside were several dates, along with a few short sentences. They leave at 8. Back by 6. Bedroom upstairs. I started trembling when I saw the notebook, because those notes reflected our daily routine. The police asked if we believed someone was stalking us. We said no. They tried to contact the previous owner of the house. However, he had sold the house and moved to another state many years ago. However, a neighbor provided the police with an odd piece of information. There used to be an old service path behind the house. During the previous owner's time, it was connected to a door in the basement, but that door had been sealed off years ago. The police went outside to inspect the area. There, on the old dirt ground, they found fresh footprints, and those footprints led from the backyard toward the house. However, there were no footprints leading back out. This didn't necessarily mean someone was inside the house at that moment. Still, the police advised us to stay extra vigilant for a few days. We installed a new lock on our bedroom door, and we set up a motion sensor camera in the hallway. For the next 3 nights, nothing happened. On the 4th night, at 2:38 a.m., a phone notification came through. Motion detected. Upstairs hallway. Eric and I were inside the bedroom. We both stared at the phone screen. I loaded the camera feed. The hallway was pitch dark. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then, a shadow walked past the front of the door. I looked at Eric. He whispered, "Don't move." We locked the bedroom door from the inside. Then the camera sent another notification. Motion detected. This time, right in front of the hidden room's door. We didn't know what to do. Eric dialed the police. I kept watching the camera footage on my phone. Suddenly, a hand appeared on the screen. Someone was opening the door to the hidden room. The person stepped inside the room. Then, they moved straight into the camera's blind spot. That was the first time I truly realized there was someone inside our house. The police arrived within minutes. They surrounded the entire house. However, the hidden room was completely empty. The intruder had escaped. The police went out to the backyard and saw that the old door on the service path had been forced open from the outside. A few days later, the investigation revealed that a former tenant of the house had prior charges for burglary and trespassing. However, that individual could not be conclusively linked to this incident. We decided to abandon the house and move away. On the morning of moving day, I went up to the upstairs hallway one last time. The door to the hidden room was now permanently sealed shut. I stood in front of the door. Suddenly, I caught a very faint sound from inside. Tap. I froze completely. Then again. Tap. Tap. I didn't stay near that door for another second. I ran downstairs. The police were called back. They searched the entire house once more. No one was there. Yet at that exact moment, only one thought crossed my mind. When we first discovered that hidden room, we thought we had uncovered an old secret room. In reality, maybe someone intended for us to never find it. To this day, I don't know how long that person was around our house. I only know one thing: a new house can sometimes be a place to start a new life. Other times, someone else's secret life might still be dwelling inside it. Friends, in the second story, Rachel and Eric thought they had merely found a hidden storage room in an old house. However, the items inside that room proved that someone was actively monitoring their daily lives. But the third story is even more unsettling, because this time there were no hidden rooms or secret passages. There was an abandoned house that 2 friends decided to explore just to take a few photos. They believed the house had been vacant for many years. Yet, within minutes of stepping inside, they realized the house was not empty. My name is Alex. This incident happened outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. That night, my friend Connor and I went to take photos of an old abandoned house. We believed the house had been empty for many years. However, at 1:06 a.m., hearing the door slam shut upstairs made us realize we were not alone in that house. Connor and I had loved exploring abandoned places since we were kids. Old factories, closed motels, abandoned barns. Whenever we got the chance, we went out to take photos. However, that night, we entered a place we should have stayed away from. The house was located about 20 minutes outside the city, at the end of a narrow dirt road, hidden behind thick trees. The paint on the house was almost completely peeled off. A few wooden planks on the front porch had collapsed. Dust was caked onto the windows. From a distance, it truly looked like no one had lived there for decades. We parked our car by the roadside and walked toward the house with our flashlights. Connor pulled out his camera. He said, 10 minutes. Take some pictures, then we're gone. I agreed. The front door wasn't fully closed. With a slight push, it creaked open. A heavy, damp smell filled the inside. Dust lay thick on the floor. Faded, peeling wallpaper covered the walls. And the silence all around was so absolute, it felt as though the house was completely disconnected from the outside world. I scanned the living room with my flashlight. Connor was taking photos. Suddenly he said, "Alex, look at this." He pointed his flashlight toward the wall. There were several fresh scratches on it, right over the old paint. I stepped closer to inspect it. Next to the scratches, a cigarette butt lay on the ground. A fresh cigarette butt. I didn't pick it up to check. I just turned and looked at Connor. He said, "Someone's been here." I replied, "Could be kids." We still didn't leave right away, because there were a few more rooms inside the house. We proceeded down the hallway. The door to one bedroom was wide open. Inside was an old, dilapidated mattress. However, right next to the mattress lay a brand new sleeping bag. Now I felt genuinely unsettled. Connor said, "Let's leave." We turned back to leave. Right at that moment, a loud noise rang out from upstairs. Bam! We both froze instantly. I looked at Connor. He whispered, "Wind." I answered, "There are no open windows upstairs." For a few seconds, we stood in dead silence. Then, slowly, a sound echoed from upstairs. Thump, then another. Thump. Someone was walking down the stairs. Connor whispered urgently, "Run." We sprinted toward the front door. However, the door wouldn't open. I rattled the handle. Tried again. It wouldn't give. Connor yelled, "Move." I slammed into the door with all my body weight, though it groaned under the impact, but the door stayed shut. Then, the footsteps from upstairs stopped. Connor and I stood there holding our breath. After a few excruciating seconds, a low male voice called down from above, "You shouldn't be here." Connor turned to me. Then he bolted toward a window down the hallway. The window was old. After a few hard shoves, it finally popped open. Connor scrambled out first. I was about to climb out right behind him. Just then, a heavy thud echoed from the top of the stairs. Bam! I glanced back. A man was standing at the top of the staircase. He was wearing a dark jacket, holding a flashlight in his hand. His face was shrouded in shadow. He was staring straight down at me. I didn't waste another split second. I jumped out through the window. We both sprinted back to the car. We jumped inside and locked the doors. Connor started the engine. We drove about a mile down the road before pulling over. Both of us were gasping for air. I said, "Call the police." Connor immediately dialed 911. The police accompanied us back to the house. They searched the entire interior. However, no one was found. Yet, in one of the upstairs bedrooms, they uncovered an active living setup, a sleeping bag, food wrappers, water bottles, a portable heater, and a few blankets. In short, the house was not empty. Someone had been living there. The police also discovered a hidden access door on the side of the house. It led down into the basement. From the basement, an old service tunnel passage extended into the backyard. Someone could enter the house from the outside and vanish again at a moment's notice. The police searched the surrounding woods that night. However, the man was never located. We thought that was the end of the incident. However, the next morning, Connor sent me a photo. It was one of the photos he had taken inside the house the night before. I zoomed in on the picture. It was a shot of the living room. The two of us were standing near the doorway in the shot. However, deep in the background, In the pitch-black darkness of the hallway, a human face was visible. The man was staring directly at us. And at the exact moment that photo was taken, neither of us had seen him standing there. Connor forwarded the image to police. They stated it might serve as evidence in the investigation. However, the man's identity was never confirmed. Even today, I look at photos of abandoned houses. However, if a house has broken windows, if a door is left unnaturally ajar, or if I spot fresh cigarette butts, food wrappers, or a sleeping bag inside, I never step foot inside, because I learned one lesson that night. Just because a house looks abandoned from the outside does not guarantee that it's empty on the inside. Friends, that wraps up today's 3 creepy house stories. All 3 incidents share one single truth. The terror didn't stem from any ghost. It came from places we initially assumed were ordinary, vacant, or safe. Someone could be lurking behind a basement wall. A hidden room in a new house might not just be for storage. And an abandoned house might not actually be abandoned after all. So, before exploring any old or abandoned property, always prioritize your safety. Because the most terrifying thing in the dark isn't always what you can't see. Sometimes, it's the thing that is staring right back at you. I've been your host on True Horror Vault. We'll meet again with more dark, realistic, and disturbing stories. Until then, stay vigilant. Pay attention to your surroundings. And if you suddenly hear a voice coming from inside an old house, it might just be time to run. Good night,